I was thinking on my way here, I was reflecting 20 years ago, I was speaking in a room very similar to this one, except I was a lot younger, and it was in Australia. I was a student activist running campaigns around Australia's aid budget. And in the course of a few years, there was a lot of kind of amazing campaigns that we worked on. Some of them won, moved hundreds of millions of dollars. It was kind of addictive. I think it's what set me on this current path. But I became pretty disillusioned with what I saw as the incrementalism, the bureaucracy, some of the paternalism of the aid sector as a whole. So I left, did a whole bunch of stuff, scaled a tech company, did some philanthropic advising, and a bunch of other things. But along the way, I've kind of been circling around this question for a long time. How do you have impact at scale? It's a really hard question. And in the 2 decades now that I've been at this, I've grappled with some big questions like how do you raise capital, build technology that works for hundreds of millions of people, navigate political and media crises. There's like the high highs of massive growth, big wins, big teams. There's also some really low lows of leading through failure, failed business models, giant layoffs, sense of despair. It's kind of had everything. Today I wanted to share some lessons, both from my own experience as well as GiveDirectly's experience more broadly, about scaling moonshots. Before that, I think a lot of people know what GiveDirectly is, but I'm going to give a really quick backgrounder. Our goal is to use cash to accelerate the end of extreme poverty and increase the effectiveness of the aid sector. We use technology to send unconditional cash transfers to people in extreme poverty, and we religiously study the impacts. Despite very significant skepticism along the way, a huge number of studies now has established cash transfers, I think, as the benchmark to beat. And in the coming months, 13 years after GiveDirectly first became public, we are about to deliver our billionth dollar directly into the hands of people in poverty. I think it's a big deal. So there are 3 reasons why I am both a donor now and leader of GiveDirectly. First, as I mentioned, I think the evidence is very clear. Cash is amongst the most cost-effective interventions for making a difference in people's lives. But that's not the only thing. And I know that kind of effective altruism as a whole is like very focused on this question. Like, how do you have the most marginal impact with your dollar? And for me, that question is very important, but it's not the only question. The second question that brings me to GiveDirectly is about dignity. People in extreme poverty face impossible choices every day. It's choosing between medicine to treat a kid or having a full belly when you go to sleep at night. It's about having a dry place to sleep or sending your kids to school, having to trade those off. Investing in a business for tomorrow or buying a mattress for an aging parent so that they can sleep through the night. Those are really hard questions, and I don't think they have right answers. A lot of us spend time trying to answer those questions, like how do you trade off between those different outcomes? I think a better and more important question is not what's the right answer, but instead who gets to answer. The entire aid sector involves rich people in the global north sitting around in rooms like this one, making those choices for them. Cash is different. It puts agency and power squarely in the hands of those who are affected. But that's not the only reason that I'm here. The third is scale. I am not here to have an impact on the margins. I think cash is one of the very, very, very few interventions that can credibly absorb billions of dollars, not just with the same effectiveness, but with increasing effectiveness. And that is something that GiveDirectly is kind of religiously focused on. And today I'm going to talk more about this scalability piece, particularly in the context of big bets and what we've learned about pursuing them. So first, really quickly, why are moonshots important? I think the way that I think about this is that the incentives of doing aid development, global health work, determine outcomes. And there's a lot of incentives that I think we should dislike about the way that that sector is structured. Failure is punished. There's huge risk aversion, for good reason. There's a huge bias towards incrementalism as a result. There's also a bias towards what's easily measured. what we can measure ends up driving a lot of our behavior. And I think that extreme poverty demands acting with both urgency and ambition. And so obviously there is a place for high confidence incrementalism. I donate a lot to high confidence incrementalism. But if we look at the portfolio of investments that the world is making, I think we're sorely short on low probability but truly game-changing scalable bets. Moonshots matter because they unlock disproportionate resources and talent. It's motivating, it's mobilizing. And they also inspire creativity and determination. I've seen teams achieve things they thought were impossible when they started with a goal and worked backwards. And a good moonshot is very rare. You have to take the unimaginable complexity of the world, plus the overwhelm that we all feel at the scale of the issues and the intractability of moving the needle on them substantially. And you need to boil it down into something that is, one, audacious enough to unlock motivation and inspiration, two, is plausibly achievable while being big enough that, if achieved, would meaningfully move the needle, and then distill that down into a single sentence. That is extremely hard. We have tried to architect GiveDirectly to relentlessly pursue moonshots. So I want to take some key lessons we've learned about getting to this point that I think could be broadly applicable and share them. The first, don't over-engineer test in the real world. Everyone will tell you why your scale-up won't work and what will go wrong. A pattern that I see that is a common failure mode is trying to forecast everything. We have heard it all, that in the hardest to reach regions, markets don't exist, and so cash is not going to have an effect. That cell tower connection, that there's not enough coverage in different parts of Malawi for our mobile money architecture to actually reach them, and therefore it's not going to work the more remote you get. We've heard that paying large numbers of people all at once will cause runaway inflation. Now, we could have preemptively over-engineered to avoid these warnings. Instead, we went ahead and we tested in the real world, first at small scale, and then as we grew confidence from the qualitative feedback that we got and the indicators that we saw, scaling it more aggressively. What we've seen over and over again is that when cash arrives, markets are created. They don't need to exist. When you think that there's not enough cell coverage, I've seen and I've met people who literally hike hours, climb mountains, go to the top of a tree just in order to get that one bar of cell coverage, and then they're handing phones up and down the tree just in order to get the reception, and then creating a chain of transport all the way down to town so that people can collectively cash out. People have enormous ingenuity. When we did really careful research and about doubling local GDP in the space of several months, and we carefully staged the rollout of cash and measured prices in the market week by week in order to make sure that inflation wasn't happening, and gave ourselves levers to pull back if it was. We saw zero inflation, or 0.1% after 3 months, and 0% after 5. We bias to testing assumptions quickly and in the real world. That is the first lesson. Second, build a broad tent. GiveDirectly has 4 donor archetypes. We have the EA rationalist types, libertarians who hate middlemen, anti-colonial progressives, and just plain empaths. Each of these different archetypes has given us tens of millions of dollars over the years. And they bring completely different values to our work. We work incredibly hard to keep our communications simple and accessible. It's almost like a Rorschach test. You know, the ink blots that a psychiatrist shows you. It's like, what do you see? It's like, we want to be the ink blot where people can see whatever they want to see. EAs critique us for oversimplifying. Progressives want us to take political stands. Empaths want more heartstrings pulled on the stories. We have been served well by not morphing into any single worldview. And to achieve that, we've very deliberately hired very diverse talent Our team comes from tech, from finance, from government, from entertainment. Our former head of compliance actually used to run a bar just down the street. What you will find in common for people who work at GiveDirectly are proven track records of impact in whatever industry they come from, and extraordinary agility and curiosity. I think EA orgs often overweight alignment and in-group language, and they underweight hard-earned experience and adaptability, and we have tried not to fall into that trap. Lesson 3. Everything breaks as you scale. In Uganda, a few years ago, we had been just getting on with our work. We were like investing in partnerships or government relations people, attending conferences, doing these like meet and greet things. That sounds inefficient. That seems like a lot of patting ourselves on the back, feeling good, and we're just going to get on with our job. And then when misinformation starts to spread about our work, rumors start flying that as a result of GiveDirectly cash transfers, families are breaking up, there's community tension, so on and so forth. It comes before national cabinet. We have no allies, they have no idea who we are, and we get shut down. That took us 2 years to dig out of in Uganda. Now we have government relations teams in every country. We have presidential level relationships everywhere we work. It's a non-negotiable. Just 2 weeks ago, I actually co-hosted an event with a number of Ugandan ministers at UN General Assembly Week. And it's just night and day from where we used to be. Neglect the politics at your peril is the lesson there. But new problems do emerge. Earlier this year, the Malawian president kind of included our program to scale up in a particular district in his State of the Union speech. Before we know it, reasonably significant numbers of people are moving to that district, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. Now, we are not seeking to trigger mass-scale migration in Malawi, and so we had to freeze operations. We need to redesign our rollout. We needed to coordinate extremely closely with local leaders to make sure that we had a solution to this. And that all needed to happen within days, not weeks, not months, but days. Your ability to react fast to existential threats, I think, matters more than preventing every risk up front. Next lesson, trust is everything. In 2022, organised crime infiltrated our Democratic Republic of Congo team and diverted $1 million from recipients. This was a near total system failure, compromise of our entire team. Honestly, it's one of the darkest moments in the organisation. It was incredibly difficult for everyone. And one of our values as an organisation is proactive candour. And so we knew that we needed to disclose this publicly. We needed to disclose this proactively. And I got to say, it's a really terrifying thing to do. We braced for a donor exodus. And instead, when I talk to our donors, many still name it as the moment that they grew to trust GiveDirectly the most. Because it's when things are hard and when you fail that trust is built. And when people have stayed with GiveDirectly over many years and are willing now to sign tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollar checks, that happens as a result of trust. And trust isn't just about candor and transparency, because I know that that's actually fairly widely accepted within this community. It's also about competence. I had a conversation with one of our major donors about why they joined, why they started giving, and why they continue to. And they said they gave because we were at this intersection of dignity and impact and highly credible evidence. That was why they joined. But why they stayed and why they have scaled up significantly over time is because every single interaction they have had with someone at every single level of the organisation, they have been impressed by. I think organisations need to treat every single hire like it could be a $100 million hire. Every person on your team is your representative to the world. And we have held an incredibly high bar, sometimes to our detriment. It sometimes means you move slower, but overall, I think that is something that has worked out well for us. Lesson 5, hold on to your theory of change. Our relationship with effective altruism has sometimes been volatile. A decade ago, I think GiveDirectly only exists because well, not only exists, but certainly it helped a lot when a decade ago, GiveWell was like, GiveDirectly is a top charity. And we stayed on that list for a long time. We were delisted 3 years ago, and then new assessment increased the effectiveness by 3 to 4x last year, based largely on data that came out in 2019. And now we're actually working really closely with the GiveWell team on building programs that we both think have really high potential for exceeding their bar. At every step, we have felt a lot of pressure to optimize for EA metrics. We didn't, because our theory of change is different. We think the person weighing impossible trade-offs should be the person in poverty, not us. That's not something that you can put a metric on. And when people ask us to compare cash versus malaria nets, which, just to be very clear, I personally donate to malaria nets. I think they're an important intervention. I think they're great. But we don't try to make that comparison. We're not trying to compete just for the marginal donation. We're trying to shift hundreds of billions of dollars in ineffective aid spending towards cash. And so we try not to get distracted by debates at the margins when what you're playing is a different game entirely. Final lesson. Engineering for scale means different choices. One example of this. Should we precisely target the very poorest families in each community that we work in? Or should we saturate where we enroll entire villages and accept that some percent of families may not be extremely poor? Now, we may be more cost effective, certainly by EA metrics, if we laser targeted, but that doesn't set us up well to scale. Precise targeting is quite slow, it's quite costly. It's bad for community dynamics. It's hard to explain to a community why you selected some families and not others. And it's really tough to maintain the political buy-in that you need required to scale. Every time we make program design choices, we are sitting at that intersection of those three circles. 1, is it cost effective? Is it impactful? 2, is this scalable? Are we keeping it sufficiently simple such that this is a system that can credibly absorb billions of dollars within months? And 3, is it centering the agency and dignity of the people that we work with? We also invest in technology and partnerships that only really matter if we get to massive scale. And that requires trade-offs. We've invested a bunch in telco partnerships, in technology that mean that over the next kind of 18 months, I can say to you confidently that we could absorb and deploy $1.8 billion without changing our systems. That infrastructure only counts if we actually are able to scale. If we're not, then it looks like bloat, it looks like waste. And so the trade-offs there are real, and we have tried to stay true to the fact that we're kind of swinging for the fences. We're not trying to make sure that every dollar on the margins is exactly right. So where to from here? I think we have a really credible pathway to mobilizing and effectively deploying billions of dollars. And I think this is a time in human history when there are more people than ever before who can sign multi-billion dollar checks. And people who I talk to who can regularly say they wish they could confidently deploy larger amounts of money. And while I do think this is one of the few heads you win, tails you don't lose, asymmetric upside bets, there are many, many things that we haven't figured out and that we're still grappling with. We're figuring out, can we make our field tech and payment systems even more scalable? How do we make our programs even more cost effective by improving the program design, layering AI, reaching more vulnerable populations? And can we grow our coalition of funders into a larger movement? I am excited to talk more about all of this maybe in the office hours afterwards or take questions. Appreciate you showing up. Thank you for having me.